Some jobs are scary enough on their own, but when you work the night shift, you see things most people never will. These are 3 true terrifying stories from people who worked in the dark and barely made it through the night. Nights in the old hospital were a different world, a place where the silence of abandoned hallways whispered of lives long forgotten. My job was simple: stand guard, patrol, make sure no one was where they shouldn't be. Most nights, the silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of fluorescent lights or the echo of my own footsteps. But some nights, the building seemed to remember what it once was. It was just after 2 in the morning when I turned into the East Wing hallway, where the old tile floors were always colder than the rest. That was when I saw them. 3 figures, each wearing what looked like cleaning uniforms, pushing carts loaded with supplies. They moved with purpose, their movements synchronized, almost mechanical. The light from the overhead lights reflected off their carts, casting long shadows against the peeling walls. I raised my hand, offering a friendly wave. The figures didn't respond. They didn't even look up. With a slight sense of unease, I continued on my route, footsteps echoing as I made my way back to the security desk. Curiosity nagged at me. I checked the logbook. No cleaning crew scheduled tonight. The building was supposed to be empty, save for me. A chill crawled up my spine as I flipped through the schedule again, searching for any mention of a late-night cleaning shift. Nothing. Needing answers, I pulled up the security camera footage. There I was, clear as day, walking the corridor, hand raised in greeting. But the hallway behind me was empty. No carts, no uniforms, just shadows and stillness, and me waving at nothing at all. In that moment, I realized that sometimes the past lingers, and old hospitals keep secrets long after the lights go out. The night shift at a gas station is an eerie kind of quiet. The outside world seems to be asleep while the fluorescent lights buzz overhead, casting long shadows across the snack aisles and empty aisles. The steady hum of the freezers and the distant rumble of passing trucks become familiar companions as time passes. I've gotten used to the loneliness, to the feeling that I'm the only one awake for miles. But that night, something felt different. The clock read 3:30 a.m., the hour when fatigue and silence conspire to play tricks on your mind. I was restocking the cooler when headlights washed across the front windows, cutting through the darkness. A car, a beat-up sedan, pulled up to the pump closest to the door. I waited for the usual routine. The driver would step out, stretch, maybe nod in my direction, and begin fueling. But the door never opened. The engine went silent, and the car just sat there, idling in the stillness. Minutes ticked by. Beamed then 10. I peered through the glass, curiosity mingling with a creeping unease. The silhouette in the driver's seat didn't move. The parking lot, usually empty at this hour, felt suddenly oppressive. Every shadow seemed to press in a little closer. Concerned, I decided to check if something was wrong. Maybe the driver had fallen asleep or was in distress. I stepped outside, the cold air sharp against my skin, and approached the car. The world was hushed, the only sound my own footsteps crunching on the gravel. As I drew closer, I could see him, a man, sitting perfectly still, hands clenched around the steering wheel. His eyes were fixed straight ahead, unblinking, as if he were watching something only he could see. The engine was off, and the silence was absolute. I hesitated for a moment, then tapped gently on the window. The sound seemed to echo too loudly in the quiet. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, the man turned his head toward me. His movements were unnatural, almost mechanical. Our eyes met, and a chill ran down my spine. He smiled, a thin, unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. Leaning closer, he whispered through the glass, his voice barely audible but cutting through the stillness like a razor. "I've been watching you for hours." The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. My mind raced, searching for any sign of familiarity, any hint that this was a joke or a misunderstanding. But his gaze was empty, and the smile never wavered. Without another word, he started the engine. The car lurched forward, tires crunching on the gravel as he drove away into the darkness. There was no license plate, just a blank space where one should have been. Within moments, the tail lights vanished, swallowed by the night. I stood there, rooted to the spot, heart pounding in my chest. The world seemed to close in around me, the silence now broken by the relentless thump of my pulse. When I finally forced myself to move, every instinct screamed at me to get inside, to lock the doors, to put as much distance as possible between myself and the empty lot. Back in the harsh glow of the station lights, I tried to shake the feeling of being watched, but the memory lingered, a shadow at the edge of my vision. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of anxious glances and phantom footsteps. Even now, I can't help but wonder, how long had he really been there? And why did he choose me, alone in the night, to remind me just how thin the line is between safety and fear? Working the night shift at the school, I'd come to know every creak and echo of the place. When the last sliver of daylight faded, the corridors stretched endlessly, their emptiness magnified by the hush that seemed to settle over the whole building. After 10 o'clock, silence became absolute, thick enough to weigh on the chest. It was a silence I had learned to fill with the shuffle of my feet and the rhythmic swish of my mop. That night, like every other, I moved methodically through the halls, checking classrooms, wiping down windows, and locking doors. The only sounds were those I made myself, until midnight. That's when I heard it, a faint, persistent ringing, cutting cleanly through the quiet. At first, I froze, unsure if my mind was playing tricks on me after too many hours alone. But the sound was real, growing louder with every hesitant step I took toward the source. The ringing led me downstairs, to the oldest part of the school, the basement, where the old principal's office sat untouched. People said the place had stories, but I'd always brushed them off as idle talk. Still, I remembered clearly the phone line had been cut years ago, long before I'd started working there. No one ever went down to that office anymore, not for anything. But the ringing wouldn't stop. It echoed up the stairwell, insistent and cold. I reached the heavy wooden door and pressed my ear against it. The phone's shrill cry was unmistakable, coming from within. With a deep breath, I gripped the handle, the metal icy under my palm, and pushed the door open. Instantly, the ringing ceased. Silence fell again, but it was different now, heavy and expectant. A chill swept over me as I stepped inside. The air was frigid, biting through my uniform and raising goosebumps along my arms. I could see my breath misting in the stillness. Old trophies and dusty books lined the shelves, untouched for years. And on the desk, bathed in the faint yellow glow from the hallway, sat a rotary phone, its cord unplugged, trailing uselessly off the edge. I stared at the phone, heart pounding. It shouldn't have been ringing. It shouldn't have been there at all. But something was happening. I could see the dial spinning, slowly, deliberately, as if invisible fingers turned it. With each click of the dial, the tension in the room grew. The air seemed to thicken, pressing in around me. I wanted to step back, to close the door and walk away, but my feet refused to move. My eyes were locked on the phone as the dial spun to a stop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, from somewhere deep within the phone's mechanism, a soft, static whisper drifted out. barely audible. It was impossible to make out the words, but the tone was urgent, pleading. The cold deepened, sharp and unnatural. It felt as though the room itself was holding its breath. The whisper faded, replaced by a low, hollow click. The dial began to turn once more, slower this time, more deliberate. I couldn't help but wonder who or what was on the other end of that line, waiting in the darkness beyond. I stepped closer, drawn by a mix of dread and curiosity. My hand hovered above the receiver, trembling. Every instinct screamed at me not to touch it, not to answer whatever call had managed to cross years and silence to reach this forgotten room. But some questions are louder than fear. As I finally wrapped my fingers around the icy receiver, the cold seemed to seep into my bones. I lifted it to my ear, bracing for whatever was to come. In the silence that followed, I heard only my own ragged breathing, but somewhere, far away, a voice began to speak. The night shift hides more than shadows. Sometimes, it reveals things we were never meant to see. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe to Vault 313 for more weekly horror. And remember, the darkness is always watching.